Hey engineers, Diggrok here. I have been playing quite a bit of Approximately Up, and this is a super fun space sim building game. And as I've been tracking the Discord and watching other videos of people play this game, I realized that since there isn't much of a tutorial in this game of how to build ships and systems, that a lot of people are left struggling and have a lot of questions that are gone unanswered. So I thought it would be useful to create a tutorial for how to build ships in Approximately Up. So in this tutorial, I'll teach you how to create the basics of a ship, and have the subsystems and some of the basic blocks like gyroscopes and altimeters and that kind of thing. So that way you can get to a little less swearing at the game and a little more flying around. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to clear our slate. You can press Ctrl G to select everything on the platform, and you can press X to delete the components. Now we have a blank slate. This is similar to what you will see when you complete the tutorial. You'll finish the tutorial and you'll just be left with this big empty landing pad, and it's sometimes you don't have much direction of what to do. What you will see are your objectives when you press O. You can come over to your planet here and click these objectives, and you can kind of see the requirements. And for the first one here, Lost in Transit, you can see you have to pick up a package with the dimensions of 1.2 by 1.2 by 1.2, which is the size of a small gate, or the package can fit through a small gate. So this gives you an idea of how big you need to build your aircraft. So to start, we'll open our inventory screen. And you can see here next to the different component types, like the frames, there's a 730 number. For Windows, there's 40. And these numbers will go up as you do more missions, so yours might be a little lower if you haven't completed any missions. And you'll see things like thrusters. We get 6 of these fans, 2 of these thrusters, and so on and so forth. Now, these numbers aren't just the number for this specific frame, for instance. These are the numbers for the entire category. So for me, I can place 730 total frames. So when I place any one frame and open my inventory, you'll see it goes from 730 to 729 for all of these. So you can drag these items down to your toolbar to set them into a number. And this is toolbar 1. You can press Control 1, 2, 3, or whatever to get to these other windows of toolbars all the way to 0. So you'll drag the blocks you want down into here. And initially for our new ship, we are just going to create a frame here. And we're going to create a pretty rudimentary frame just for the sake of this tutorial. When you're building, you can jump with spacebar and then double tap shift. And that will enable a jetpack, so you can fly around in jetpack mode, which sometimes makes it a little easier. I like to build up a little higher so I can get under the build a little bit better. So here we will place our first block. It doesn't matter where you put it. These are all sort of on the same grid, so even if you just place things randomly, they will ultimately connect to the same grid once you build them together. So it doesn't really matter where you start. So we'll just start by placing a row here of these blocks. So it can obviously take a sec to place all these blocks. So if you didn't want to just keep placing a bunch of rows, you can actually copy this and paste it. So you can press G to enter into the selection mode. And anytime you enter into these modes, you'll see in the bottom left corner, there are shortcuts that appear to give you instructions of what to do. So you can see press right mouse button to set corner. So we'll come to our end over here and we'll click right mouse button to set our corner. And then we can drag out here, and you can see you can make this really big or small or whatever. And then you get to the end and you press right mouse button again to finish your selection. And now we have this selected. Now you see in the bottom left, we have all kinds of controls that we can do to modify the selection. And within this, we can press C to place and duplicate components. So we'll press C, and you'll see it'll turn red because we can't place it on itself. But we can move this now over here. And then we can confirm placement with E. And then we've now copied it. Now if you wanted to just do that again, right mouse button, make your selection. Boop. And then press C to place duplicate components. Drag it over here, and you can even press C again to drag it over here again. And that's how you can sort of quickly make your frame. Let's say now I wanted to go up with this. I can actually rotate this selection by using right mouse button here. Rotate it up this way. Then we'll move it into position. And there we have it placed there. And we can now press C to again move this to the other side over here. And we can press C again to actually maybe move it a little higher. You can use the mouse wheel to move vertically. And then again, C, move it over here. And press C again. Move it this way. Right mouse to rotate it. Move it into position. C again. And there you have it. And then E to confirm placement. And now we've really quickly just copied and pasted and made our frame. Now, what you can also do is open your tools and find the welder. So you can take this welder here and add it to your toolbar. I already have it set here at 0. And if you want to, you can actually weld up these different armor panels. And if you weld the outside, it does not weld the inside, so the inside ones are still exposed. Now, welding does increase the structural integrity, and it seems to impact the shear strength of anything that's on here. So like if things are mounted to a surface, they can sort of shear off if things like hit the ground really hard. So if you want to improve that, it seems that welding these up and then mounting things to it makes things stick to it a little bit better. But obviously with this increased durability comes more weight, so you can press H and this enters into a debugging mode where it will tell you about things about like missing connections and stuff, but it will also show you your center of mass and your weight. So you'll see our weight is 3834 and you see our center of mass is slightly to the right, and that's because this side of the ship is welded and the other side is not. So just keep in mind what your center of mass is, because this will impact later when you place thrusters. So if you're going to do something like welding or armoring, make sure you're doing it symmetrically if you want to make sure your center of gravity stays perfectly in the middle. You see now with this side welded up, our center of mass is back to center once again. And we're going to keep the front of the ship open at first because there's going to be a bunch of stuff we're going to have to do to run wires and stuff. And sometimes it's a little easier if you can access everything in the front before you've completely buttoned up everything. Okay, now I'm going to put just a little spot to put our controllers and such for our cockpit. I don't like to put these all the way in the front because there's a lot of wires and stuff that are going to run out of the back of your joysticks. So you want some room between the front of your ship and your controls, so that way you can have enough room to run wires and power cables and that sort of thing. So we'll put it back a little bit. And building it raised like this can also help you run wires underneath of it and mount stuff to the front of it. And we're going to want a seat, so we'll go to our inventory and look for a seat. Bring that down here. And it's okay if this desk is kind of high, because one thing that we can do with our seat is, so if you have, anytime you have a tool selected, you can press tilde and it'll just bring back to your hands and let you control things. The seats have this really cool lever, so you can raise the seat up to whatever level you want. And then you can kind of sit in your seat and look around and see if that's a good enough height for you or not, but obviously just adjust it accordingly. Okay, so now that we have sort of the foundations of our ship here, we're going to want to start adding our thrusters. So the first thing we're going to want to add is our RCS thrust. Now, if you ever get confused about RCS thrust, you can press M and it opens up manual. And I'm sure that this will be expanded on in the future as well. But here you see we have one called the Maneuvering Spaceship. And this shows you sort of the foundational systems for the RCS thrust. So what we're going to need is a joystick and a RCS thrust receiver. This is a wireless receiver, and a battery to power the receiver. And then you can see on this grid as well, it tells you sort of the placement of where you want the RCS thrusters and what to set the settings to, because there's a wheel on the side to set the setting of the thruster. So this just serves as an initial guide if you ever forget how to set this up the first time. So in our inventory, there's a few things we will need. Let's search RCS. We will need the RCS thrusters. We will need the RCS controller. We will need a battery. We will need a joystick. The joystick 3D is the one that we want. And we're going to need some cables. So we have data cables and we have power cables. So let's just go ahead and add both of those as well. So we'll put our console together first here. So we have this joystick. We will place this. And the cables are supposed to go in the back. And when you place any joysticks, buttons, and stuff, you'll see that there's this label that's highlighted in the front. You can press E to interact with this label, and that lets you type. So we'll call that RCS. Then you can press escape to leave that, and now you can label it as RCS. Now on the back side here, we're going to place our RCS controller. And you can see we have these different outputs. So red is power, and yellow is data inputs, and blue is data outputs. So we want the output of this joystick to get sent to the RCS controller to send the signal to which RCS thrusters are going to fire. If you ever can't remember the output and input, I always think of yellow, hello, like hello, this is the welcome input, and blue for adieu. I bid you adieu, data, have fun. That's stupid, but it works. So it is important which of these go into which of these holes. These are, if you line these up like this is the direct connection from there to there. But if you ever forget, again, open your manual and you can see the placement here. So your yaw is this left one, the pitch is the center one, and the roll is the right one. Remember, roll right. So we're going to run the data cable here. It doesn't matter which side you start on. So you're going to hold right click and drag while you're holding. And then when you get to anywhere you need a corner, keep holding right click and then tap left click. And that lets you place a corner and you can run it to there and then left click to confirm that. So hold right click, left click to do a corner, left click to confirm. Right click, left click corner, left click confirm. Okay, so we have the data hooked up. Now we need to hook up red for power. So I'm just going to place a battery here and then select our power cable. And we can just right click, left click, and then down. Boom. All right, now our RCS controller has battery power and also the data is hooked up. So now we just have to set up our RCS thrusters. So again, remember, this can be a little tricky to remember, but if you ever just, again, forget which placement is best for these thrusters, just reference this manual here, and this will show you the best places to yaw, pitch, and roll. So we'll just follow the recommended manufacturer's instructions here. Place one here for our left yaw, or rather it makes us go right. Our other yaw over here. We'll put a pitch up top, and then a pitch on the bottom. Then we will add roll here, and a roll here. Okay, now these are not configured automatically, so what you'll have to do is come up to each of these, and there is a knob on the left side here. Oops, I fell. There's a knob here that lets you cycle through all of the different configurations of what this RCS triggers. And again, if you can't remember which side is the left side or right side, just reference this guide here. So for this one, roll B is our left side, and roll A is our right side. You'll see both roll and yaw A are the right side, and pitch A is the bottom. So left and top is B for our roll. So we'll go roll B, set this to roll A. This is yaw A. This will be yaw B. And again, pitch A on bottom, pitch B on top. So we'll change this to pitch A. And this one to pitch B. Okay, now we can see that this bottom RCS thruster is sticking out more than anything, which means this is going to be exposed in the event of any sort of landing scenario. So what we are going to want to do is to protect this, and we will do that by going to our inventory, and we have these dampeners. And what these will do is just absorb the impact of any kind of fall. And to ensure these have max strength, we're going to weld together these armor plates at the bottom here. And if ever it's too dark and you can't see, press T, and there's two flashlights. There's a wide beam and a direct beam. So just use T to use your flashlights. Just going to weld the corners here, and we're going to place these on the corners, and then we are going to place our dampeners. And if you ever forget what is top and what is bottom, reference the thumbnail image. You can see the thumbnail image. The gray is the top and the black is the bottom. Okay, now that we have our dampeners, when we land, our RCS thruster will not be damaged. Now the ship is not ready to fly yet. It still needs thrusters. The RCS will just control the rotation. But if you ever wanted to test your flight, you can hold down R, and this will enter sort of your sim mode, which is also how you'll go and run missions. So let's hold down R. And you'll see that we had a pretty big bounce there, but the dampeners actually sort of bounced us and absorbed the impact. Now I would not recommend starting from that high. So if you hold R again to destroy your spaceship and enter back into construction mode, I wouldn't recommend always having this high because things will shear off and break inside your ship. So you can press Control G, which again selects everything, and you can scroll down with your mouse wheel and you can bring it down to the ground and then press E to confirm that. And now your ship is on the ground. So if we were to get into our cockpit now and test out these RCS thrusters, you see we have this controller. You see that nothing is happening too much, and that's because we have to be off the ground for this to work. So we need to put on our thrusters. So we are in atmosphere, so we're going to search for our atmospheric thrusters. So just type atmo, and you'll see we have three thrust types. We have the atmospheric thruster, which just points in one direction. We have the atmospheric fan, which has bidirectional thrust. And then we have the atmospheric lift fans. So let's just go ahead and add all these in here. So for forward and backwards thrust, what we will want to use is this bidirectional one, and this will allow us to go forward and backwards with the same fan. And when you're placing your thrusters, again, the center of mass is really important. If you don't place thrusters in center of mass, you will get rotation. So we'll press H to open debug mode and find our center of gravity. And you can see here, we can't really place it directly in the center. And that's okay because you can place it and then you can always add additional weight elsewhere on the ship if you want to get it more centered. But for now, we're going to place it here. And when you place this, you're going to want to keep in mind that there are power inputs and data inputs as well. Hello, yellow. And you also have the switch, which lets you reverse or normalize the input of the data. And we'll get to why this is important in just a second. But for now, we will place this one here, and then we'll go to the other side and place that in the exact same spot. And again, ensure where your controls are. I like to keep them on the same side. So if both my controls are going to, my inputs are going to be up high, then I'll put them on high on both sides. Okay, so now we will have thrusters that will go forwards and backwards. So now we also need to add in some lift. And for this, we'll actually use the lift fan. And for the lift fans, we want to look at where the vertical center of gravity is at. So here it's pretty close, locked in the middle here. But I want to have 4 lift fans. So what I'm going to do is actually just place them symmetrically on the front and back. So we'll have one fan here, And then same another spot here in the back. Then we'll place them back here. Put the inputs close to the wall in there. And if you ever want to make sure that everything is staying attached, you can hold down R to enter into your regular fly mode, because not everything is a sticky surface, so to speak, in terms of it can hold a weld onto the wall. So for instance, if I place this like this, the builder doesn't deliver any kind of errors that there's anything wrong with this placement. But if I go into fly mode, you'll see that will fall off the wall. And that's because the back side of this atmospheric thruster is actually not a weldable surface to weld onto anything. Hopefully, eventually debug lets you know if a item is actually welded or if it's just floating there. But just know that for these lift fans, only the side mounts are what you can use to mount things to. And you'll see the same thing with the batteries, where the only mountable sticky surface is the bottom of them. So you can mount them like that. But if you put them like this, the bottom one will fall and the top one will stay. So just something to keep an eye on with the different components, and make sure you're testing everything. But we'll just leave this for right now. So what we have to do for both of these is to get them power to every single thruster, and also send the data input from a controller up front into both the horizontal drive and the vertical drive. And this is going to start to get more into cable management, and this is sort of an art form to learn within this game, because you can sort of get a spaghetti mess pretty quickly. So the first thing we are going to do is place some batteries. Now, depending on how long of a mission you're going to run, it's going to dictate how many batteries that you're going to have in your build. You don't get a ton of batteries to start, so you might as well just kind of load up with all the batteries that you can. But if you ever are curious about power consumptions, you can open your inventory screen. And for the batteries, for instance, you can see over here that this battery has a power capacity of 4,000 power. And the medium one, for instance, has 25,000 power. And then you can go to your thrusters, and you can see that the bidirectional atmospheric fan consumes 8 power per second, and the lift fans consume 4 powers per second. These batteries are non-rechargeable, so you want to make sure that you don't run out of power during your mission, or you're likely going to fail your mission. And every time you enter from build mode into creating the spaceship mode where you can fly around, your batteries will start at full charge, so there's nothing to like maintain in between missions. Whenever you reset your ship, it resets with full battery. For the sake of this tutorial, let's just place a few batteries here. Now, you could wire one battery into one thruster, but as you get more and more thrusters and you don't have a ton of batteries, this isn't necessarily the most efficient. So what you'll actually want to do is create a circuit for all these to be on the same circuit, so they just have the maximum amount of power possible. And to do that, there's another block that we're going to need, and that is the power router here. So the power router will allow you to put all of your power onto one circuit. For this, it doesn't matter what is an input or an output. Everything connected to the same wiring will all be considered one circuit. There is no direction for power or anything like that. It's just, if it's wired all together, it'll be all on the same circuit. So we'll take our power cable and we will wire this into our router. And again, the router is one of those blocks that does have a sticky and non-sticky side. So you must see the icon up. If it's face down like this with the icon down, this backside is the only sticky side. The side with the icon is not sticky. So if you were to start your sim with the sticky side out, you're going to see that fall off. Okay, so all of 3 of these now connect to this power router. So anything I connect into this power router will get battery from these 3 batteries. So now we just need to connect all of our thrusters into this circuit. So I'm going to take a power router and put one on the outside out here. And just for the sake of cleanliness, I'm actually going to reposition these thrusters so that this power is on the bottom and this power is more to the right. So let's just do a quick rearrangement. And also we're going to want to get our wires to the inside of the ship. And to do that, there is another block that we will need. It is part of the frame. And it is this frame quarter with ports that is an armor block that allows you to run power and data through. And there's also one as well to run a corner. But let's just take our straight one and add that into our toolbar. So we will punch through here and put this block like so. And then we will fill in our holes with some blocks here to make sure our ship is sealed. And then I'm going to place a power router here, and we will wire this power to this. Oops, that's a data cable, not a power. You'll notice that's not connected. And if you press H, you'll get these exclamation marks in the debug mode to let you know those aren't connected. It's very common to place the wrong cable. If you place the wrong cable, you can press Control and Alt, and it will select the entire run of cable. And then you can right-click to delete. Select our power cable. Run this cable, and we'll leave room here for our data cable. And since this data cable is actually probably going to need a little bit more room, we're going to move our RCS thruster down and move this power block down. So again, you can press G to select what you want, and then mouse wheel to move vertically, and you can move that down and confirm placement. That just gives us a little bit more room to place this. That will make sense here in a second why I did that. Run power to there. Now we need to run our power out of here to there, and power out of here into there. So these are all connected to the same power circuit, and I'm going to want this power to be on the bottom. So we're actually going to change this block again and move the power to the bottom. And this is just me being super particular, but I also just want to have a clean demonstration. Okay, so we now have all three of these powers running to this circuit, and that runs in through that port there. So let's go ahead and make those changes on the other side as well. Now I like to make sure my ports are oriented the exact same way. So we'll delete that. The red is on the low inside, just like that. Okay, so now we have power in the same circuit and running to the inside on both sides of the ship. Now we will need to connect this and this into this circuit over here. And the way we will do that is another power router, which we will put right here. And we can take this power, wire it to there. This one, we will go down to the floor, run it across our floor, plug it into there, and then we can run this there into that power. And now through a bit of a spaghetti mess, this is all powered up. Now, I don't love this span here, and the next thing we're going to do is add a gate back here eventually as well, which will need power also. So actually what I'm going to do is delete this and take this power box and move it here. Then we will wire our circuit into this power box. We'll run into this box over here. And then we have one extra port there that we can wire to our gate. You can see you can definitely get lost in the sauce with just cabling, but regardless, our thrusters all have power. Now we need to send the data, or rather have a joystick to send the data to the thrusters. Okay, so in order to control our forward, backwards, and our vertical thrust, we are going to need a lever. So we're going to open our inventory, and we are going to see there is a lever vertical. So we're going to add that to our toolbar. We're going to place two of them, and the data port is the back. You'll want the label in the front. Place that there, and place this here. For this one, it will be our forward and reverse. And this one will be our vertical. Now for vertical, we just want a simple 0 to 100 power. But the forward reverse, we actually want it to be bidirectional. So we don't want it just to be one. So you'll see on the right side of these levers is a button. So when you press this, let me do it for this one. You can see you can access it through the corner here. It changed from this straight 0 to 100 to a bidirectional. So 0 is in center, and then 100 to minus 100. And this will let us go backwards or forwards. So now we just need to send the thruster data into these here. So that way it exports this data to our thrusters. So first things first, let's get our thruster data cables to our ports here on the outside. And we're going to want separate data circuits from the vertical as we do for the horizontal, because they're going to different control surfaces. So just like we have a power router, we also have a data router. So we'll add this to our toolbar. Now, as you can see with this one, there is one input on one side and two on the other. And you see that one is yellow and two are blue. Remember, everything goes from yellow to blue, so don't match yellow to yellow. So we want to run these yellows into these blues. So we'll take this yellow to that blue and this yellow to that blue, and that will give us one yellow to go through our port nice and cleanly because they share the same data. Plug that vertical into there. Take this one, we'll have to jog over this wire here and leave room for that data cable. Plug this into there, and then we'll route this into the ship. Now our forward backwards thrust needs to be on a separate circuit, data circuit that is. So we'll wire this into a separate port. So now both vertical thrusts run to this data router, which then goes into the inside of the ship. And the forward backwards is on a separate circuit, which runs into there. So now let's do the same thing on the other side. And again, you want to make sure that you're going into the same input on both sides to make it easier when you're wiring on the inside. So our vertical fans, which are lower on the ship, we will put in the bottom port with the forward backwards in the top front port. Okay, so now the data for both lifts are running through the router and into the bottom port, and our forward backwards here is going into this port. So now we have to go into the ship and route this data to our controllers. So let's just run these along the wall to get behind our control seat here. And we're going to remember that this controller is forward and reverse, and this one is vertical, which is why you label everything early. So we're going to place one data router here, and one data router here. We're going to hook these to our controllers. Now we need to bring our forward reverse for this one and our vertical for this one. And to make this just a little bit easier, and the reason I raised this kind of console off the ground here, is we're going to run the bottom one under the desk. So let's cut it here. Run this one under the desk. So the bottom one will go under the desk, and the forward ones come straight to here. And make this connection. Okay. So you can see pretty quickly that the wire things get out of hand. So you want to just try to stay organized as you go and create some good logic for this, but you'll get better as you play. So now the higher cables, which are our forward backwards, are going to our forward back thrust, and the lower ones are now going up to this router into our vertical controller. Now, something to note with cables is sometimes you might be placing a cable and you'll notice you'll get these like red errors that appear. This means your cable has gone too far without needing support. The conduits need support, so you can only go so far unsupported before it hits an error like this. So if you see this, you just need to get it supported up against some type of weldable surface. Okay, so now with everything wired up and powered, we are ready to test our systems to make sure they are good to go. Before you go off on your mission, test everything to make sure all your control surfaces don't have any errors, because there often are errors, and I already know there are some within this system, and I will show you how to diagnose these different errors. So let's get in our control seat, and we haven't made our spaceship yet. We're still just in the regular mode. When you're in a seat here, you can press left Alt, you see there, to edit key bindings. And when you press Alt and enter this keybind mode, it again will give you the shortcuts of how to do everything. So you can click one of your sticks. So here's the forward reverse. I'm going to, you can click these little arrows here. I'm going to assign my forward to W and my reverse to S, and my vertical to space to go up and C to go down. This is just how I like to do it, but you can set it up your own way. And then you can press left Alt to exit this mode. Oh, I also forgot I like to set my roll to E and Q. And setting these keybinds when you're in the building screen, along with setting any of these levers, will set the default lever. So this vertical here is at 4 right now. So when I leave the build mode to create the spaceship, you'll see that this has already got power, which means that if I'm now switching back to build mode, and you're doing that by holding R. So when I'm in build mode, nothing works, there's no power. But if I like had this set here, this lever is defaulted at 74. So when I go to create my spaceship, it's just going to take off. So in this case, spin, which we'll get to in a sec. So we'll reset back to build mode. So just make sure when you're in this mode, all your levers are set to what your default settings are that you want them to be. That said, let's go back into flying mode and test our systems. So we'll give it a little bit of vertical, see if our vertical works. And you can see we can get some verticality. Now, every ship will be different on sort of where the hover mode is, so you'll have to sort of learn your ships. But if you're having a hard time getting to hover mode and finding that these levers are too sensitive, you can hold control while you're using any of these surfaces, and that will enter more of a precision mode, and you can fine-tune exactly your different thrusts. So our vertical works just like we want it to. See if we can find a hover. Doesn't really matter. Get close enough. Now we notice with our forward reverse that we are spinning, and that is because we need to reverse one of our forward and backwards thrusters. If you're spinning, it's because there's a switch on the thrusters you have to change. But before we go and fix that, let's check our RCS. So we'll roll right, looks good. Roll left, looks good. Yaw right is good. Yaw left is good. And pitch back is not working. We're not pitching back. And pitch forward works. So the pitch is not back. Pitch back is not working. So, and our forward and reverse is spinning us. So we have two things to fix. So first, let's figure out our pitch. So we went back into our build mode. We're pressing escape to exit our seat. You'll find that if you're in a seat and you've mapped your keys, like here I mapped E to this joystick, which normally is how you can exit a seat. So the keybind takes override. So now I can't press E to exit the seat, even though that's how you get in and out. If this happens, just press escape. That lets you get out of the seat. So our pitch isn't working. So let's just double check our pitches here. So we'll see on our top pitch, this is set to pitch B, which again, as you check the RCS manual, that is the correct one. And the bottom one is supposed to be pitch A. So maybe it's our bottom one. So let's go down here. So I have it set to roll A. So this needs to be set to pitch A, and that's why my pitch wasn't working. As for the thrusters, the reason that we are spinning is because these are mounted opposite on either side. Because we have the data on the bottom for both of them, one of them is upside down and one of them is forward. So that is where you get this polarity switch. So I don't know if it's left one or right one off the top of my head. So let's just flip this one to reversed. So this input is reversed. The other one is normal. Now we will go back and enter into our creating spaceship, and let's test our controls again. So let's do our forward and reverse. So our forward now is going forward, and our reverse is going reverse. If you made that change and you found that your forward is now backwards and your reverse is forwards, that means that instead of switching the switch we did, you'd flip it. So the one we changed would stay normal and the other side would be reversed. Now we want to check our RCS pitch to make sure that our pitch is corrected. So pitch forward is working and pitch backward is working. Now, if you didn't like the forward to pitch down and the backwards to pitch back, just flip your pitch A and your pitch B, and that will invert this joystick for you. So that way it works the way you want it to. And that's what's cool about all these knobs and all these different thrusters is you can sort of set them up and program them to however you want. So as you fly around, you should see that you have good control over your ship. And with your keybinds, you should have decent ways to control the maneuverability of your ship. And this will always take some practice, especially since there is, no baked-in hover mode. You're going to have to sort of figure out what the hover for your ship is individually. And because we centered our thrusters on all of our centers of mass, when we go up, the aircraft isn't pitching or rolling or anything. And as we're going forward and backwards, the aircraft is also not doing any kind of pitching or anything like that. Now, just as a quick demonstration of what happens if you have offset thrust in any axes, here I added an extra fan to the front. So now our front half of the ship has more vertical lift than the back half of the ship. I'll show you the impact it has. So now with all that extra thrust, when we do our vertical thrust, the ship is actually going to roll backwards because there's too much thrust in the front half of the ship. And you'll see the ship, just with that alone, is rolling backwards, which is no bueno. So that's just a reminder of if you're using any of your thrusters and you're noticing that your ship is like rolling or pitching or doing something it shouldn't be doing with just that one axis, it probably means that your thrust is not centered with your center of mass. Okay, so now our ship is flyable, we have great controls, and we can maneuver this thing exactly how we want. But before we go off gallivanting on our adventures, we need to add a few more systems first. You'll notice with our objectives that these first ones are picking up package, which have dimensions which fit through a small gate. So we are going to want to put a gate on the back of our ship or wherever, so that way once we have our packages on board, they don't go flying out of the back, which they will if you don't have a way to secure everything. So let's open our inventory up and search for gate. And let's add a gate to our ship. Now the gates do have, again, a data and power port that are on them. Here in this case, they are down here. And we're going to want those on the inside because we want to control our gate from the inside of the ship. So we will put them down in this bottom right because all of our power and stuff is over here. Remember, we left that power port earlier I was telling you about. We will tap into that power port exactly. Okay, so now the gate has power and we're going to seal off around our gate. Now we are going to need to have a control for our gate. So there's a few different types of controls and different systems in here. There's like buttons and switches and levers and stuff. So the prescribed option is to use this switch. So I will show you the switch, place our switch, and then we just need to send a data cable to that. And now when we enter into ship mode, we have the switch, which will allow us to open and close our door. Now that's pretty cool, but there also is an additional thing we can do with this door. We can actually delete this switch, and if we want to, we can use a lever. And what this allows you to do is you can actually set it to certain values. So if you only wanted to open and close the door part ways, then you can do that. This kind of seems ridiculous, but it does have some uses. When we were going to the moon and we were in space and we wanted to see behind us to see how close we were getting or use it for reference, we were opening the gate partially and then looking out of it like this without getting sucked out of the gate entirely. So it does have some uses, but it's just something else that's fun with this game when messing with data inputs when everything is responding to different integers between 0 and 100. Just another fun way you can wire up your gate. Okay, so back in build mode, now we have our gate. And again, make sure that this is set to open. If you have this set to 100 when you're in build mode, you can't see anything working. But when you switch to creating the spaceship, this will close by default, which means that if you are outside of your ship and you start to create a spaceship, the gate will close without you in it, and then you'll be locked out of your ship. So again, just make sure the default when you are in the build state is to where you want it to be. Okay, so now we have a gate, but we also need to know where we are going for our missions. And for that, we are going to need a radar. So we're going to search for radar, and we're going to add that to our toolbar. And the radar, you can see, has a port on it just on the top here. Doesn't have any other ports. And that port is in fact a red power port. Now the radar is again one of these objects that only has one sticky surface, which is the backside. So if you were to place it like this and create your spacecraft. That is not connected and it will fall off. Okay, so you can place the radar wherever you want, but it is going to need power. So the first thing I did was, instead of having this power run directly to the RCS thruster, I ran this power to a power router, and now that power is running to the RCS thrust there. And now I have 2 more outputs where I can hook in additional components, which is what I will do for the radar. For my purposes, I'm going to put the radar on the side right here, and the direction you place the radar does matter. So if you look at the icon, the red icon is the top. See a little bit better there. Red icon is at the top. So that is considered the top of the radar. So we will place this oriented like that accordingly. But you can see the power comes out of the top. So if you did not want the power to come out of the top, you can place it at any angle you want. And this middle knob here is the radar rotation, and that'll allow you to rotate it wherever. So if you turn it sideways, you can turn it 90 degrees, or if it's upside down, turn it to 180 degrees. And when you set this default in the shipbuilding view, it will save that setting forever. But we'll just leave this at 0 degrees, again, using control for precise adjustments. And we will power this thing up. Okay, so that's all you need for the radar. When you go to create a spaceship, you will now see that your radar is working. You have a zoom level here, which will be helpful when you get really close to your packages. The circle on the package is the base. You are the center of the crosshairs, and if you have a objective to do, which I've already done mine, you'll see it as a square on the radar. And this right knob is a brightness. And again, here you have rotation, so you can set your permanent rotation should you have the radar mounted upside down or sideways. And this button here is to turn the radar on and off. Just a reminder that all of these components, such as radar, do use power. And again, you can view the power use in the inventory screen here. So the radar consumes 2 power per second. We have all of our control stuff, including our RCS thrust, just hooked to this battery here. So just keep in mind that as you're flying, that you have enough power to supply your entire ship, because if these controls go dead, especially the RCS thrust, you'll lose RCS thrust, but otherwise you won't have your radar and you'll be lost out wherever you're at. Another useful thing to have is the Gyro-Line, and that will sort of shows the spaceship's pitch and roll orientation on the screen. So let's add in a Gyro-Line onto our ship. We'll just do the same thing we did on that side, where we will add the gyro here. And this just needs power. But you can also output the data. Remember, blue, adieu, adios power, or adios data. You can hook data to this and send it to other monitors or to meters or whatever. Otherwise, we need to get this thing power. And I'm actually going to put another power router over here because there is another device we are going to hook up that needs power. And we'll connect these circuits, take our power here, and connect that to this circuit. And maybe I'm a little nervous that we're going to run out of battery. So something I can do is, if I have battery to spare, I can take a battery here and I can send this battery to this power router. And that is now hooked up to the full circuit. So now we have ensured that we have enough power to power all this electronics that we're adding here. But now that we have this gyrometer, we can create our spaceship here, get in our seat. Now as we fly into the air, as we change our pitch or roll, you will see our Gyro-Line show us if we're level or pitch or anything like that. This will just be really useful to gauge how level your aircraft is and anything else going on. Very useful flight tool. And here you can see our radar. We can zoom in, and as you go forward, you will get a gauge of how fast you're moving. Again, the circle is the base. We are the center line. So if you notice that things are not going forward and that they're going a different direction, like if it looks like it's going to the right, that just means that your rotation is off. So just set your rotation to whatever you need to make sure that that is accurate. Now let's take this a step further, and let's say that we want to add a camera to view below our ships. So that way we know we can make good soft landings. So we are going to go into our inventory, and we have initially the CRT monitor, but eventually you will get smaller LCD screens. And we are going to also need a camera that we can hook to our CRT monitor. Okay, so let's figure out where we want this monitor. I think we will hang it from the ceiling, like so. And we can just get in our seat to see if that's a good placement. That should be a good placement. We should see that very well as we are flying. And as you can see, this is going to need power, and also the camera on the back side of the camera also is going to need power. And then we have data, so the power will hook up and the data will also hook to the monitor. So first, let's place our camera on the outside of the ship. I'm going to just place it here in front of this landing gear. And on the back side of the camera, you see there's also a rotational adjustment. We'll get to that in a sec. And then I'm going to need to port these to the inside of the ship. So again, we'll take our frame quarter with ports. We'll delete this block. We'll add this in here, fill in our gaps, and we will run power into this power port. And we will also run data into the port below that. Now we need to hook this up to power, but our monitor also is going to need some power. The camera we will hook to here. And for the monitor, we're actually going to add, yet again, another power router to there. So that is all on the same circuit. So now we can run power from here to there. And then we need to feed it the data from the camera. So we will run a data cable up against our frame over here since it has to be supported. And down to our port, which actually we'll tap into this port because we're going to need a little bit better of an accessible port for something else. I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so we got the camera hooked there in that port. So those are connected. So we have power running to the monitor and data coming from the camera. So now when we enter our seat and go to spaceship mode, you'll see that we have a camera. If it looks gray, it's because when you're on the ground, the it's just the gray ground. Now, just to test to see if our camera is straight, I put this little triangle here, and what that will allow us to do, so when we enter our ship mode here, if we look at our camera, if we want our camera to be straight with our ship, this should be pointing the same direction. So you can see that the camera is turned 90 degrees. So what we have to do is on the actual camera itself, we will want to turn this 90 degrees, and I'm doing this in the build mode. That way it saves my preset. So we'll try plus 90 and see if that was the right direction. Turn our ship back on. Now it's pointing down instead of forward, which means that instead of plus 90, we need to go minus 90. So we'll enter back into build mode. So that way it saves this as a preset. Let's turn this to plus 270 degrees rather. Now when we enter into create a spaceship, now you see that that triangle is pointed forward. So our camera is now oriented in the correct position. Now there is one very last thing that I want to show you, and that is hooking up an altimeter. There's a few different types of meters, such as velocity meters, trajectory meters, altimeters. And I think there's a few more that you eventually unlock, and they all kind of hook up in a similar way. So I just want to demonstrate at least one of them. And the altimeter is especially useful, and you get it after your first mission, because your second mission, you're going to be flying over an ocean. It's going to be hard to see everything. So we'll add the altimeter. The other thing we're going to need is a meter to read it. And just this data meter here will work. So first, let's place our data meter. And this does have a label, so you can press E, altitude. And on the back side of this meter, you'll see there is an input and an output. The input and output just means you can also output the number. So if you want to send the data somewhere else to some other kind of meter or something, you can do that. Otherwise, we just need to get the input from the altimeter. And actually, I'm going to move it over to this left side because we're going to port through that port over there. So I'm going to put it over here instead. And the altimeter, you can see, just has no power. It just needs just that one data port. So we'll take our data cable, yellow, hello, blue, adieu. So we want it to welcome the data. So we're going to, that we know is our input. And you can see really quickly that the spaghetti fest does ensue pretty quickly. So we'll hook this to the bottom port there. So now we have the altitude coming out of here. So let's run this to the out and down. And looking at our altimeter in our settings here, measures height above sea level. For proper functioning, it must be mounted outside the ship with an unobstructed view. So we want to make sure that this is mounted unobstructed. We're going to raise our ship up by pressing Control G and scrolling. Let's just place it here. So that should be hooked up, and the altitude it measures is above sea level. But as you can see, as we raise altitude, now our altimeter goes up. Our landing camera is in the right orientation. And now we are pretty much ready to fly. The last thing you want to do is just button up the front of your ship. And if you're using windows, make sure you're using the windows that have the little armor on the bottom. You can see some of these have armor on them and some of them don't. If you mount one of these that does not have any armor around it, the window will fall out. The armor is a connection point to armor, but otherwise windows can connect to themselves with just these open-ended things. So anywhere it's going to connect to armor, if you want it to be sticky, ensure that you are using the proper window for that. But with that, you should now have a functioning and flying ship that should serve for all your mission running purposes. And once you've made your ship, you can save it in blueprints. So you can press B to open blueprints, and you can press this plus button and name your blueprint. Cool ship. And then you can set everything from garage, and that will pull everything from your garage into here. And if you want to load a blueprint, you just press load and replace garage, and that will load in whatever new ship you have. So you can really quickly swap between all of your different ships. Now, one bonus tip for those of you that finish your first two missions and ready to go to the moon. When you complete your second mission, you will unlock the electric thrusters, which are these, and these will work in space. But the tricky thing is you only get 2 of these. So I would recommend, if you're having trouble getting to the moon, the best way to use these from what we've played with our experience is to mount these as both as vertical thrusters right on your center of vertical mass. And don't bother with forward or backward for this. And this allows you to, when you're landing on the moon, land more like a lander. So you're going to stay pretty level and just use your RCS thrust. So as you tilt forward, you're going to use your vertical thrust and they'll let you go forward, kind of like if you're landing a moon lander. And this is really the best way that we found to navigate to the moon and land on the moon, rather than trying to have like one thrust forward or one backwards or anything like that. Because again, if your thrusts are not centered aligned, if you have only one forward and it's not in the center line and it's perfectly centered here, it will make your ship rotate in a bunch of different directions. So the easiest way to land on the moon, keep them on your center of mass and use them as vertical thrusters. And lastly, as a general rule of thumb, if everything is hooked up and you think everything is powered right and you're using these different things and you're not noticing that anything is happening, just check all your connections. It's most likely a connection issue. Once things are hooked to power, they don't need to be turned on or anything like that. They're on by default. So if these are not working, it's likely a control issue, or else the component you're trying to control is not hooked up to power. So just check your cabling, and that is most likely where your issue lies. But that's it for me. I hope this tutorial was useful. The approximately up demo will last until March 10th, and then the full game will be released in Q2 here of 2026. If you found this useful, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I will catch you later. Godspeed, engineers.